think it was in my last video, I talked about the SEB UAZ 452 vans, which were part of the solution that SEB were trying to find to Land Rover no longer making the 1 tons and the forward controls in the end of the 1970s. So they also experimented with 4-wheel drive versions of the Bedford CF350 van, which I don't think they had very many of, but they certainly tried them. But basically when Land Rover reinvented the Land Rover in the form of the 110, SEB were very interested because they particularly found the 127 appealing. So the 110 was to replace the 109 with Coil sprung version. You then had the 127 was a crew cab pickup version with a longer wheelbase, obviously by 17 inches, carry a crew of 5 and 650 kilos of equipment. So quite a useful bit of kit for overhead line work. So SEB started getting 110s. They were 110 V8s, hard tops. The usual winch, roof rack, racking in the rear for the equipment. There was then the 127, which was supplied as a crew cab pickup and then adapted to the board's needs. They fitted a hard top rear body, full length ladder rack, winch. Both types are Michelin XCL mud tyres for off-road use. The 110s and the 127s were V8s. They had the 3.5 litre V8. They did have a few 90s, not very many, but they had a few. I don't know if they were V8. The only ones I've got pictures of appear to be turbo diesels. They're a little bit later. Although the board did start getting them from 1984 when the 90 was launched. They also had 6-wheel drive versions of the 110 for use as a cherry picker. I'm not quite sure who did the conversion. I don't know if it was Hotspur or someone else. Alongside these, they were running RB44 cherry pickers, which are a bit bigger. Those were the type with the initial type with the Ford A series cab, and the later ones with the Dodge cab. The earlier vehicles they also had as Luton vans with either 2-man or 4-man cabs. I think they had a bit of both. I don't know how many they had, again not huge numbers. The Land Rovers they had quite a lot of. They eventually went over to diesel power. Initially the board didn't like to run a power takeoff off a diesel engine, although I don't really know why that was the case. But later they went from the V8 to the diesel, certainly the 2.5 turbo diesel engine, some of which they converted to using the Range Rover 3-speed automatic gearbox, which was not a great success. It was not really powerful enough for that gearbox, and the vehicle was either labouring in third or just revving its nuts off in second. So I don't think they lasted very long. I think they were around 1989, 88, 89. The idea was to leave space for a third person in the cab at great compromise to everything else. So I don't know if any of those survived. But that's just a little overall history. I'll add some photos to the video so you can have a look at them. I'm just going to stick to the green era. Later vehicles, see dark grey. We're talking about Southern Electric, the private company, which I'm not really so knowledgeable on. But SEB, the board, had quite a few interesting vehicles, not just Land Rovers, but this is just to talk about the Land Rovers that they used. There were also specialist versions, the 127, such as the IT Fitters vehicle, which was a Luton body on a two-seat cab, or three-seat cab perhaps. But most were just hard tops or crew cabs with a back body on, used for overhead line work. So I don't know very many survivors. I was aware of a D-Reg 127 that survived, and an A-Reg one that was subsequently crashed, unfortunately, after restoration. Don't know of any 90s. There's a couple of 110s. Certainly none are in preserved specification, if you like. They're all adapted to later usage. So if you know of any, let me know. It'd be interesting to see. I hope that's just an interesting little overview of those vehicles which served the board throughout the 1980s and into the 90s, and in the years before the TDI, before the Defender. Of course, some of the board's vehicles were really early sliding window versions. Of course, it was an angled window on those. Most were wind-up window. They had some very early 127s with the square rear door, which was very soon deleted. They used a standard station wagon rear door with an infill piece. So that's it really. Just a little potted history. Hope that was interesting. And leave a comment, ask any questions. I'll do my best to answer. I hope you've enjoyed that. Take care. Thanks a lot.